We remember. This is the cenotaph in London's Whitehall. Those who fought for our country and the leaders who sent them into conflict will gather to commemorate the lives lost and the service given. In an era of modern war, the new head of the military tells us this morning the UK is helping protect Belgium from attacks suspected to be from Russian drones.
The Defence Secretary and I agreed at the end of last week that we would deploy our people and our equipment to Belgium to help them.
And a new frontier online. One mother tells us her son took his own life after an obsessive relationship with a virtual girlfriend, a chatbot that wasn't real.
It's like having a predator or a stranger in your home, and it is much more dangerous because a lot of the times children hide it.
With us live this morning, the Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, and for the Conservatives, the Shadow Defence Secretary, James Cartlidge. Morning, and because of Remembrance Sunday, we get to spend our time together until 10:15 today because of our special coverage. And with me at the desk for that whole time, the internet expert, Professor Gina Neff, welcome to you, the environmental campaigner and presenter, Chris Packham, and broadcaster, Susanna Reid. A warm welcome to our trio for this morning. Let's start, as we always do, with a look at the news. And it is Remembrance that sets the agenda for the Sunday Mirror and the Sunday Express. Stories about veterans on the front of both, and also a picture of Prince George joining his mum, the Princess of Wales, at the Remembrance Festival in London last night. But for the Sunday Times and the Sunday Telegraph, it's the BBC, which we expect to apologise tomorrow after allegations about news coverage and a Panorama documentary. But the Observer leads with the impact of the budget that's coming soon, how that will affect the younger generation. While Davina McCall's successful breast cancer operation splashes the sun on Sunday. And she found what was wrong actually after a campaign that had the involvement of one Susanna Reid. You're still involved in that campaign, aren't you? And we're pleased to see you here this morning. Let's though start with Remembrance Day, because it is a special day for so many families and so many people, whether they have personal involvement in the military or not. Chris, is it something that you think about this day? Is it kind of marked in your diary?
Yeah, it's a legacy left from my parents. They were both children in the war, and they both had quite traumatic experiences. So in the post-war period, obviously when I was a kid, that patriotism ran very strong. My father and I were all building an airfix Spitfire, and I would be taken to the Southampton cenotaph during Remembrance Day. And then much later, when I was in my 20s, because my father's interested in military history, I read a series of books by Lynn MacDonald, and they had been transcribed from first-hand accounts of survivors from the First World War. And to be honest, the book was so deeply shocking that I came to London on the train, and I just wanted to stand and look at the faces of those primarily men, but some of them women as well, the nurses that had treated them, that had gone through that trauma and somehow survived and rebuilt their lives. So the mental health aspect was something which I found deeply concerning.
I mean, that's an incredible story just from one person's connection, Susanna. As the generations change and we move through, do you think that importance is still felt by as many people?
I hope so, because that sacrifice, that fight is so important. It led to the freedoms that we still enjoy today. On Good Morning Britain this week, we had an absolutely devastating interview with a World War II veteran, Alec Penston, who talked about the fight for the freedoms and suggested it wasn't worth it, considering the country that we have today. An absolutely devastating indictment. We have to consider what freedoms those World War II veterans fought for and how we honour them, what those freedoms mean to us today.
And Gina, as somebody who's not from the UK, but looking at the way we have these ceremonies and the kind of national moment that many people mark, what do you think? Do you think it's quaint and maybe a bit strange, or what goes through your mind?
We don't talk much about World War I as a reflection or remembrance in the United States. So it was one of the first things that really helped me make the transition to this country and helped me feel now as a new British, that we take the time to not just think about our immediate past, we don't think simply about the threats that are facing us in the future, but we really honor that legacy and history. And for me, being able to stand in those memorial and remembrance ceremonies has been powerful as part of coming into the country and feeling a part of it.
Well, we're glad to have you as a new Brit with us here in the studio this morning, and we'll be back with our panel a bit later in the programme. It is a big day, but it's been a bit of a grisly week for the government again. Lisa Nandy's department, Culture, Media and Sport, used to be nicknamed the Ministry of Fun. But frankly, it can cause as many headaches as many other government departments, as she has discovered this week. This is a man called David Cogan. Now, he is to be appointed to be the new football regulator to try and solve some of the problems in the sport. But Lisa Nandy was found this week and said sorry for unknowingly breaking the rules because David Cogan, who was a well-known Labour supporter, had donated £2,900 to her 2020 Labour leadership campaign. Lisa, you're with us for the first time since the election, actually, so we're glad to have you in the studio, but you've not had a great week, so let's just go through what went wrong. David Cogan's name was brought in for consideration after applications had closed. Just really simply, why didn't you declare that he specifically had given money to you before he got the job?
Well, it's not quite correct that his name was brought in after applications had closed. He was actually approached to apply for the position under the last Conservative government who began this process. He'd previously been appointed by Rishi Sunak to the board of Channel 4 and he was approached by the department and went on to the original shortlist.
And he's a well-respected media executive. There's not a question about his ability to do the job, which has been welcomed by many people. But why did you not declare he had specifically given money to your leadership campaign?
Because I didn't know. And the report, there's been a thorough report by the Public Appointments Commissioner, who is independent of government, that has accepted that I didn't know about that donation. It was below the amount that was required to be declared to the Electoral Commission. It didn't appear on any of those lists, and it wasn't in the information that I requested and was given at the time. As soon as I did find out, of course, I declared it, I chose to declare it, and I recused myself from the process. So I didn't appoint Mr Cogan. I didn't take the decision on that. It was delegated to the Sports Minister.
But why was it not discussed at the interview that he was a Labour donor?
It was discussed at the interview that he was a Labour donor. It just wasn't discussed that he donated specifically to me because I didn't know about that. He hadn't recalled it. But as soon as that was discovered, as I said, as soon as I was given that information, that same day, I'd put that information into the public domain and recused myself from the process.
But he didn't think that it wasn't, he didn't realise that it was relevant to say to the world and say to civil servants and talk at his interview about the fact that he had given money to the person who was the Secretary of State.
David Cogan is somebody who is well known to be associated with the Labour Party and has never made any secret.
And everybody knew that, but this is about the important process that surrounds these appointments. And you say, first of all, that you didn't know, and then second of all, although the Public Accounts Commissioner says it wasn't discussed at the interview, that it didn't occur to him to bring it up either. Why did your department not disclose that he'd donated nearly £35,000 to Labour in the years before his appointment?
Look, Laura, I'm really happy to answer your questions about this, but I can't speak for David Cogan about why he didn't disclose that donation.
But why did your department not disclose it?
They did. They disclosed it on a number of occasions, but what they didn't do was add a line to a particular press release about David Cogan having donated previously to the Labour Party.
But whether it's a press release or you not knowing or it not coming up fully in the way that it ought to have done at the interview, this just gives a picture that either it was just sloppy or what the Conservatives would call it is cronyism. It's all a bit convenient that somebody who was a well-known Labour donor got this great job.
Well, the difficult question for the Conservative Party is, if he's simply a crony, why on earth did they put him on the shortlist in the first place?
But this question is for you. This process was full of mistakes, whether they were inadvertent or not. You're the Secretary of State. It looks terrible, does it?
I take full responsibility for it. We didn't meet the highest standards throughout this process. That is on me. I'm responsible for the Department of Culture, Media and Sport and our appointment processes, and I have unreservedly apologised. I think people would expect us to uphold the highest standards.
Well, that's what you promised. They expect it. Let me remind people what your manifesto said. It said, a reset in public life, a clean-up. that ensures the highest standards of integrity and honesty. That promise looks farcical now, doesn't it?
Well, I don't think it does, and I'll tell you why. Because as this lengthy and very thorough report has concluded from an independent commissioner, I didn't know about the donation. I was the leadership candidate. I was out on the road. I was doing several hustings. I was doing interviews with you on that process. I didn't know about that donation. I wasn't involved in fundraising for the campaign. And as soon as I found out, I declared it and recused myself, and I complied fully with the process. I'll tell you what the difference is. The difference is that when we make mistakes, and we will make mistakes, we're human beings, we put ourselves through those independent processes that are there for the reason, we respect the outcome, and we take the consequences. The difference between us and the Conservative Party, frankly, and the reason we've been so critical of the way that they behaved in government, is because you've got a Conservative Party that are making allegations of cronyism towards a well-respected individual who's widely agreed, as the cross-party select committee said, is the right person for the job. By contrast, they've got somebody sitting on their front bench who broke the ministerial code, refused to resign, and now sits as their shadow foreign secretary. I have said, hands up, this was not a perfect process, and all of those mistakes I take full responsibility for. I apologise for them, and more importantly, I'll put in place processes to make sure that that doesn't happen again.
OK, let's move on then, because your department covers lots of different areas, not least the BBC. Now, right now, and all over this morning's papers, the BBC's under fire for decisions made about its news coverage. One of the particular claims is about what's described as a misleading edit about a Donald Trump speech from the day of the Capitol riots in 2021. I just wonder, have you watched it, and did you think it was misleading?
Well, I have watched it. What I haven't seen is the full version of the interview versus the clips that the Panorama programme showed. But I have discussed the range of issues that that were raised in the email that was leaked to the BBC. It isn't just about the Panorama programme, although that is incredibly serious. There are a series of very serious allegations made, the most serious of which is that there is systemic bias in the way that difficult issues are reported at the BBC. I've spoken to the chairman this week. I am confident that he is treating this with the seriousness that demands, and I understand he will be reporting back to the Select Committee on Monday.
And we expect that the chair of the BBC is expected to apologise. And I should also say we invited the Director General or the chair to come and speak to us this morning, but they declined our request. The concerns that have been raised, though, I wonder if you share any of them. Do you?
My concern about what is happening at the BBC is twofold. I've had countless conversations with the senior leadership there, too many to name and far more than I would like over the last 15 months since we were elected. The first concern that I have is that in all of these areas, whether it's Israel, Gaza, whether it's the concerns that were raised this week about the way they report on trans people, or on this issue about President Trump, that what tends to happen at the BBC is that decisions about editorial standards, editorial guidelines, the sort of language that is used in reporting is entirely inconsistent. It doesn't always meet the highest standards, it's not always well thought through, and often it's left to individual journalists or newsreaders to make decisions. That's something that I have discussed at length with the Director General and the Chair, and something that I expect them to grip. But my second concern about the BBC is that increasingly they're operating in a news media environment where news and fact is often blurred with polemic and opinion. And I think that is creating a very, very dangerous environment in this country where people can't trust what they see. And I was very disappointed recently that Ofcom decided not to proceed with proposals to take action on politicians presenting the news. I am looking, as the Culture Secretary, at what we can do as a government to deal with this. We can't continue with a situation where people can't trust what they see.
But you're raising a concern that's not something that happens at the BBC. Politicians do present on other outlets in our sector, but that's not something that happens at the BBC. I want to cover some other issues, but do you, as we speak this morning on Sunday, do you have confidence that the Director General, Tim Davie, can and will grip this?
I have complete confidence that both Samir Shah, the chair of the BBC, and Tim Davie are treating this with the seriousness that this demands. I do want to see that response to the Select Committee, and I will, of course, consider it and have further conversations with them about the action that they're taking.
OK. We have been reporting in the last couple of days, and we'll hear the full interview in a moment, about a terrible story where an American teenager took his own life. His mother believes, because of his interactions with the chatbot Character.AI. We've spoken to other families about this too. One British family who had a similar situation where they believe their 13-year-old autistic son was encouraged to take his own life by the same app too. I know you're a parent too. Do you think that parents in this country are aware enough of the risks that chatbots present?
I think parents are increasingly anxious about it. Whether all parents have the tools to know how to help their children navigate that is another question. Speaking very personally, I worry about what my little boy watches and sees on the internet. We've got controls on that, like many parents, but particularly when it comes to chatbots, the idea that your child could be having a conversation that can lead to some very dark places with a virtual stranger is something that keeps me awake at night, and I think lots of parents as well. As a government, we passed legislation to deal with some of these issues earlier this year.
But when you talk to the regulator, Ofcom, who's trying to enforce that legislation, what they tell us is at this stage, the rules might cover some elements of chatbots, but because this is also new and evolving, they can't be completely clear about what's covered and what's not. So as things stand, do you think the Online Safety Act is fit for purpose?
Now, I agree with Ofcom. I don't think the challenge is that the Online Safety Act isn't fit for purpose, although we will keep an open mind as a government if we need further legislation. I think the issue is that none of this has been tested. And so although it is clear that chatbots are covered in the legislation, in what way Ofcom are absolutely correct to say is not clear. It's a discussion that I've had with the Science Secretary and with major tech companies. We are very concerned about it.
And are you going to clarify what it covers and not?
We are right now, Liz Kendall, the Science Secretary, and I are looking at what clarification is necessary. Now, I'm not convinced at the moment that that is necessarily a legislative change. That may be, for example, to issue guidance to make that clearer. But as a government, we will take whatever action we need to keep our children safe from harm.
OK. Just two brief things, finally, if I may. We talked a lot on this programme earlier in the year about this battle between content creators like Elton John and Sir Paul McCartney, who we spoke to. They're both, frankly, they were both very cross with your government. They even called Peter Kyle, government minister, a moron because they thought that basically you're letting down the creative industries. As the person who's in charge of looking after the creative industries, this is all on pause at the moment, but do you accept you made a bit of a mess of it?
So we didn't get it right in the first instance. I think one of the things that we've learned very clearly through the consultation is that when it comes to protecting creators and enabling the benefits of AI, one size does not fit all. The challenges for publishing are not the same as the challenges for music, so we're taking a more nuanced approach. It's not on pause, though. I do want to reassure your viewers that the Science Secretary and I have convened a series of roundtables with tech companies and creators, and our message is absolutely clear. Whichever solution we come to together, if it doesn't work for creatives, it will not work for us.
OK, well, I'm sure Sir Elton and Sir Paul will be listening very carefully to your answer. A final question. In a moment, we will hear from the new head of the military. He's told us this morning that British military drone experts are going to Belgium to help them repel what are suspected to be Russian drone attacks. I think a lot of people will hear that this morning. I think that really sounds quite alarming. Do you feel that war is coming ever closer to the country?
The situation in Russia is incredibly, and Ukraine is incredibly serious. And I don't want to downplay that, but we have one of the best militaries in the world. We have always treated it with the utmost seriousness. We're working with our allies to deal with it. And whilst we can't be complacent about the threat and the challenge that is posed by Russian aggression, we are taking steps as a government with our allies to do everything that we need to do to keep people safe.
OK, Lisa Nandy, thanks for coming in. It's good to have you with us in the studio. Thank you very much indeed. now? Well, Lisa Nandy has just told us that worrying about what her son sees online can keep her up all night. We've talked many times together about how young people's lives can be turned upside down by what happens online. And as technology advances in amazing ways, the risks are evolving too. I should warn you, this is an important conversation you're about to hear, but it can also be a distressing one.
Welcome to the future of entertainment. This is Character.AI, where any story is yours to create.
This is Character.AI, a chatbot app used by millions around the world. On the platform, you can create friends or characters and have conversations with fake versions of famous people or fictional friends. This is Sewell, an American teenager who started using the app at 13 and became obsessed. He talked to an AI model based on Daenerys, a character from Game of Thrones. The chatbot responded to him over months with messages that were increasingly intense, then sexualized, then conversations that talked about him taking his own life. These are the last messages between Sewell and the bot, where it encouraged him to come home to her. He did then, 10 months after first using the app, take his own life. This is his mother, Megan Garcia, who's now suing Character.AI in a landmark case in the US. In her first UK interview, I spoke to her and her lawyer, Matthew Bergman, of the Social Media Victims Law Centre.
I noticed a change in him in the summer of 2023, and it's almost like his light started to dim, and he started to isolate himself in his bedroom. He wanted to quit the basketball team at school, and he started to suffer. His grades started to suffer in school, and his behavior changed at school. Those were some of the changes that I saw in him, and we were trying to figure out what was happening, and we expected a little bit of this because he was going through his teenage years, but he was drastically different from the sweet, happy boy that he always was his entire life.
And what did you later, after he took his life, what did you later discover was really going on in his virtual world?
After Sewell died by suicide in our home in Orlando, Florida, I had the chance to review hundreds and hundreds of messages between him and an AI companion chatbot on a platform called Character.AI. And what I saw was a romantic and sexual relationship. The conversations were explicit in nature. And as an adult reading those messages, what I interpreted them to be is love bombing and gaslighting. My 14-year-old child was manipulated into thinking that not only was a chatbot real, but that she had emotions and feelings for him, and she kept encouraging him to quote unquote come home to her over a series of months. He also revealed to several other bots that he wanted to die by suicide, but there were no mechanisms in place to warn an adult or his parents or authorities when he discussed his suicidal thoughts with the various bots on Character.AI.
Matt, for people watching, they may not be familiar with these kinds of products. How do these chatbot platforms really work, and what are the risks?
Well, a child is encouraged to develop a relationship with a kind of a panoply of fictional characters or fictionalized characters on the Character.AI platform, and then engages in a series of conversations. Now they are actually audio conversations that are completely machine generated. But the algorithms that are designed by the large language models are deliberately sexualized to encourage adolescents to engage in sexual banter, sexual grooming, and other activity. It is also set up to create the false impression that they're talking to a real person with all sorts of features designed to emulate real human conversations. In the mind of a 14-year-old whose frontal cortex is not fully developed, who is in the throes of puberty, and who is, like most 14-year-olds, struggling to form social connections with the opposite sex. This is a recipe for disaster. And in Sewell's case, it was.
But Matthew, why do you believe that the company is actually responsible for Sewell's death?
Well, if you look at how the company designed its platform, it was specifically designed to emulate human conversations. It was specifically targeted to minors such as Sewell. It was designed to be sycophantic and anthropomorphic in a manner that led down these rabbit holes.
Megan, what happened must be beyond your worst nightmare as a mother, but why have you decided to bring a lawsuit? Because it is about a terrible chapter in your life.
When I decided to go forward with a lawsuit, my goals were twofold. I wanted to get accountability for the death of my son because this product was dangerous. It was designed in a dangerous manner and it should not have been released to children. So I wanted to do that, but I also wanted to warn other parents because the companion chatbot technology was so new at the time that I knew that just like I didn't know about this when Sewell was engaging with it, other parents were out there that possibly did not know, and I wanted to warn them because I know the pain that I'm going through, and I could just see the writing on the wall that this was going to be a disaster for a lot of families and teenagers. So I'm trying to raise awareness so parents could act because I couldn't. This is a danger that we're just beginning to understand and learn about. It's like having a predator or a stranger in your home, and it is much more dangerous because a lot of the times children hide it, parents don't know, and the ability to manipulate and deceive and groom our children in the same way that a person would groom a child sexually. The chatbot has the ability to do that.
And Matthew, the company has now said they will ban under 18s from their platform. Do you think that's a validation of what you've been campaigning for? And is it enough?
It is the first time in 30 years of law practice that I have seen a company respond in this manner to a known danger arising out of its product. So it can only be described as a very good thing. Of course, the devil's in the details, but if indeed under 18-year-olds don't engage in these conversations with Character.AI, we applaud them for taking that step. We wish they'd done it from the beginning, and we wish we never had to be here. We think this should be an example for what other companies do. The idea that it is ever a good thing for a adolescent to be engaging emotionally with a machine at the precise time in their development when they need to develop social skills and intellectual skills and the ability to, and resiliency to engage in social relationships it's never a good thing, even if the content is benign.
I'm encouraged by that first step. We have to wait to see how they're going to assure parents that they're doing proper age verification, and I mean we'll know in a few short months whether or not they are successful in getting children under the age of 18 off of their platform. For me, it's bittersweet in a lot of ways. Sewell's gone, and I don't have him, and I won't be able to, ever hold him again or talk to him. So that definitely hurts. But for the millions of families who will be protected and the lives saved, I'm grateful.
Do you think that if Sewell had never come across that platform on his phone, that he would still be with you now?
Absolutely, without a doubt. He was such a beautiful, happy child, and he had so many dreams. And he has a family that loves him and supports him. And like I said, I just like kind of started to see his light dim. And the best way I could describe it is you're trying to pull him out of the water as fast as possible, trying to help him and figure out what's wrong. But I just ran out of time.
Megan and Matthew, thank you so much for speaking to us and giving us your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, a spokesperson for Character.AI denies Megan's allegations but wouldn't comment on the pending court case. But the company told us last week they'd announced an evolution in how the platform will work for under 18s who will no longer be able to chat directly with bots. But if this story raises any issues that you'd like help with, there is a lot of help out there. You can go to the BBC website, bbc.co.uk/action line. There's a lot of resources for you if these are issues you're struggling with. And we'd love to know how you might have been affected by this issue. As ever, you can email us, kuenssberg@bbc.co.uk, or on social media, use the hashtag BBC Laura K and the WhatsApp number 08000 282 161. So let's talk then about this issue. Gina, it is heartbreaking to hear Megan tell her story. We know that there are other families who found themselves in similar situations. How big an issue do you think this is? You have studied these issues for years. This new frontier of chatbots, how significant are this evolution?
First, no parent should ever have to bury a child. But unfortunately, these issues are very prevalent and they're only going to become more so. Over 60% of British public reported on a recent survey that they had seen online harmful information over the last year. And 75% of the British public want government and regulators to do something about it. A recent report tested these online chatbots with 1,600 harmful prompts pretending to be from accounts from young people. In over half of those, the chatbot returned harmful information quickly. So within 2 minutes, these bots returned information about self-harm, about how to hide eating disorders, how to pretend that you're not drinking when you're at school, things that children shouldn't see. My own team has been looking at research, doing the same thing with health and wellness information. We know young people are turning to these, to ChatGPT and other sites to get information, and yet over half the time, they're returning information that's simply wrong.
So in terms of just how people interact, if they're not familiar with this, is literally you type a prompt into your phone, it comes back with you, and then it feels like a real conversation.
And increasingly, that's right, and increasingly it's going to be in many of the services that we use. We've already started to see Google introduce AI overviews where they're going to websites and creating new information, and the BBC itself got caught out, as you know, in headlines that went on Apple News through similar generative AI tools. So it's not just that people are going to particular websites like Character.AI or using particular apps. It's soon going to be in all the digital products and services we use if we don't do something.
I suppose the difficulty for the government, Susanna, is that technology is changing so fast. Can the regulation and the legal system even have a blind hope of keeping up? And of course, they're also anxious not to squash all the fantastic things that technology can bring us.
I know, and economically, they want to embrace the growth that is in AI and this kind of tech, but they just seem to be running to catch up. In your interview there with Megan Sewell's mum, absolutely devastating. And it will make parents think, what is my child looking at online? We all know as adults how addictive, how persuasive online material is. We joke about the fact that you can sit down, look at something online, and an hour later still be looking at it. And we know that real life activity, contact with people, you know, as Megan was saying, her son used to be active in sports, used to have lots of friends, but these kind of chatbots, so to replace that with just one individual tech voice that's so persuasive, that seems to validate what the individual young person is putting in as a prompt, and is not coming back in safe mode, where it should be saying instantly, as you did at the end of that interview, if you have concerns, this is where the help is. And it feels like AI tech should build that in absolutely front-ended when they develop the tech. If they get any kind of prompt that suggests that a young person or an individual is feeling in any way those dreadful feelings, it kicks in to a safe support mode and shuts down the conversation.
How did you balance this though, Chris? I mean, I know in your own work with scientific advancements and looking at changes in the environment, you know, technology has such incredible power for the good.
Yes, it does. I mean, I think that what we see here is technology, as we've said, is advancing far more rapidly than regulation, and this has happened, you know, on countless occasions. I note this morning, bringing it back to remembrance, that medals will now be granted for those survivors of nuclear tests. So there was a point in the last century when we were letting off radioactivity all over the world and not addressing the consequences in real time. It's a crude example of a comparison, but nevertheless it shows you that sometimes science is moving more quickly than that needs to regulate it. But from a scientific point of view, AI is providing us with enormous advantages, crunching large data sets very rapidly, looking for patterns far more effectively than humans. We were speaking earlier about an article that I'd read recently where AI is able to spot breast cancer from scans far more rapidly and save people's lives in that regard. I use it in my own garden. I've got little green boxes that record everything that sings, stridulates and squeaks in my garden. I can sit in watching your programme whilst outside it's recording that. It gets crunched and we, using bioacoustics, can get a far better idea of what's happening ecologically.
And I want to talk about COP and the climate and the environment in just a second, but Gina, just briefly, if you can though, is it possible for government to do both, to protect the safety, particularly of children, but not only of children, and also not lose out on the economic and the scientific advancements of this technology?
I think it has to. I don't think there's a choice. If we don't build up the trust that people have in the information they see, the news that they get, the ability to trust information online, then we're not going to have the adoption of AI. This is the core value of responsible AI. And the UK is in a unique position to be globally leading in this. So not taking the path of, say, the United States or the EU, but really taking our own unique path in both advocating for the development of the technology, but also making sure that we're doing it the right way.
So you can do both. Chris, then let's touch on COP. So, you know, Prince William and Prime Minister jetted off to Brazil. It's always a bit of an irony about COP because world leaders all come on their big jumbo jets.
50,000 people have all flown to the jungle.
Yeah, they're literally in the jungle.
It's a cruel irony.
There they are arriving. At least they shared a ride. You have, I think, a lot of anxiety and concern and expertise also in this area. So what's your response to these leaders gathering again and they'll talk again? There's a lot of criticism of this
unfortunately,
process.
it's destined to underdeliver whatever happens, because when COP was set up back in 1995, North American petros, lobbyists got in to the Saudis, the Kuwaitis, the Nigerians and Iranians, and basically when they set the rules for these conferences, it was that it had to, anything to move forward needed a consensus. That is, everyone had to agree. And this was their brilliant way of allowing people like the Saudis, who constantly trip up procedures, to block any significant advances. So whilst people go there with all of the goodwill and supported by all the great science, that there is no way they're going to get a consensus through when it comes to things like phasing out fossil fuels, because at the last, unless everyone agrees, then nothing happens. And let's face it, it's been going since 95. We've had the Paris Agreement and so forth that set targets at 1.5. We've lost 1.5. It's gone.
But in terms of the political consensus, though, it's different now in this country and in lots of countries around the world. The politicians aren't all putting climate at the top of the list in the way that so many of them used to.
No, but they don't need to, because they're being financed by those huge sums, $1 billion, more than $445 million went into the Republican campaign in 2024. More than $90 million went into Trump's own campaign. Here in the UK, it's not a secret that the fossil fuel companies are funding Reform and the Conservatives. That's a fact. So, these people are either denying something which is extremely dangerous, or they're puppeting for their paymasters. And what we need to do is to make sure that our politicians are better informed, which is why on the 27th of November, I will be opening a national emergency briefing, and the word emergency is critical here, in Westminster Hall. And we have hundreds of MPs and peers coming to that, because the last one was held in 2022. We need our decision makers to listen to the science.
And the Reform is not here to answer your suggestion that they're being funded by those companies. But Susanna, just briefly, if you can, the environment around the environment has changed a lot in the last few years, is it not?
It has, and I'm not sure that despite the best efforts of Chris and other campaigners, it is in the top 3 issues that people are worried about. I think if you ask most people where they placed it, it would be well below NHS, immigration, and at the top, cost of living. And until you can persuade people that making a change on the environment is going to save them money, it's going to continue to be a hard sell.
We're up against the misinformation machine, aren't we, here? Because ultimately investment in renewables provides us with cheaper energy and the energy security that we require. But we're constantly being fed misinformation, you know, and part of that, you know, relates back to our, you know, dependence upon the internet and AI. And one thing we should have mentioned about AI is it's extremely energy thirsty.
Well, that's
so it's
another
not great for the environment.
That's another whole issue, but lots to talk about with the 3 of you today. Now, a reminder for everybody watching, it is Remembrance Sunday. This is the cenotaph in London's Whitehall, where veterans, politicians and members of the armed forces and the royals will be gathering ahead of the service at 11 o'clock. And of course, too, there are services right around the country. This is a glimpse of people getting ready for the important moment at 11 o'clock in Cardiff. And across BBC One, we'll bring you the coverage right round the country, when at 11 o'clock, so many people will fall silent together to think of those who have served. And it comes at a time this year when the Defence Secretary has said the UK must make itself ready to fight a war because of threats from technology and Russia. And it's also a special day today for the new head of the military, Sir Richard Knighton. He'll take his place at the service for the first time. He came to speak to us this morning for the first time before he had to go off for his important appointment at the cenotaph.
Well, Remembrance Sunday is a really important day, particularly for those of us in uniform. It's a day when the whole nation comes together to remember those who'd fought and died for their country and the families that bear the loss. But it's also a moment of personal reflection. For me, this year marks the 30th anniversary of the Toronto crash, or a Nimrod crash, where I lost a number of friends on that aeroplane. And so during that 2-minute silence, I will be thinking of them that day. But also, I find that this is a time for us to think about those who are serving today and reflect with pride on what they do day in, day out to keep the country safe, and the families that bear their absence.
It's a day when history is front of mind, but we are also in an era of new threats. There's a stubborn war that doesn't seem to be moving much in either direction on the edge of Europe between Russia and Ukraine. Do you believe that Russia's the biggest threat that we face at the moment?
So the Strategic Defence Review set that out quite clearly, that Russia is the most pressing threat right now. The illegal invasion of Ukraine has shown the barbaric nature of Russia's war efforts. More than 1 million casualties. About 40% of the whole of Russia's economy is being, or government spending is going on defence. And so, yes, I think that is something that we need to be worried about.
But Russia's activities aren't just confined to Ukraine, though, are they?
That's exactly right. We know that there's been sabotage. The Russian state has killed people on our soil in the UK. And so the so-called hybrid warfare, this warfare that's below the traditional threshold, are things that we need to strengthen ourselves against, whether that's cyber, whether that's in space. All of those things matter to us.
But we've also seen in recent months even what appear to be Russian drones over Western European airspace, some airports even being closed because of that. In recent days, Belgium had to close its main airport because of what seemed to be buzz attacks from Russian drones.
I spoke to my Belgian opposite number in the week, and he asked if we would be prepared to support them, and the Defence Secretary and I agreed at the end of last week that we would deploy our people and our equipment to Belgium to help them. It is important to be clear, though, that we don't know, and the Belgians don't yet know, the source of those drones, but we will help them by providing our kit and capability, which has already started to deploy to help to Belgium.
So to be really clear about that then, the UK's military is being used defending another European country. And as we sit here in London, I mean, Brussels is about 200 miles from here. So the UK military is helping a European country defend itself from suspected Russian attacks.
We don't know whether they're Russian attacks, but they have had these drones which are providing disruption to their airfields and have been sighted over their military bases. And the UK, alongside our other 31 allies in NATO, will work to support each other. And that's why the Defence Secretary and I are very happy to see UK military personnel deployed to support Belgium.
It does feel, though, listening to you this morning, and I think many people watching this at home will get a sense that war is coming ever closer to us.
Well, the Strategic Defence Review set out quite clearly that we face a future or present that is more volatile, more uncertain, and there are growing threats to the alliance and to the UK. That's why we need to modernise, that's why we need to ensure that we are, to use the term, warfighting ready, and that's why the government has committed to invest unprecedented amounts in defence spending over the next few years, more than I've ever known in my career.
Let's talk then about that money, because as you say, the government has committed to enormous amounts of extra money over time. But that phrase over time is also important here. Your predecessor, Admiral Sir Tony Radakan, recently warned in a speech that while the long-term money is on the way, in the short term, there could have to be some cuts to the military of defence. But your boss, the Defence Secretary, sat in that chair last week and said he was wrong. So who are we meant to believe on this?
Well, I did watch your interview last week, and I think what the Defence Secretary was pointing out is that the government is committed to an unprecedented long-term rise in defence spending that will allow us to improve our readiness and to enhance our capability through modernisation. What Tony was saying, I think, was that as we look to the future, we can't be sentimental about capabilities that we have today that might not be relevant in the future. And it's also true to say that last year, or the earlier part of this year, that we did see reductions in our armed forces, for example, removing Puma helicopters from service.
So if you are an airman, a soldier, a woman in the Navy, you may well see cuts to what you're doing right now. We've looked at it, you know, there's cuts to marine training, there are cuts to the length of training for cybersecurity recruits. So in the interest of just being completely straightforward, there are some cuts to some things the MOD is doing in this short-term period.
So there have already been cuts to the capability. I say I was at RAF Benson when to announce, alongside ministers, reduction in the early retirement of Puma. Similar thing happened with Watchkeeper. But our focus has got to be on how do we enhance our readiness so that we're ready for that changing character of conflict. And that will mean investment in new technology like drones, like cyber, like space particularly. And that might require us to make some difficult choices as we go forward.
And you've spent a lot of your time actually in the Ministry of Defence as the money guy. People told us you were known as the money guy, but isn't it, as you take on this new job, is it important, do you think, just to be completely clear with the country that as things stand, there are some cuts despite that long-term money? And the Defence Secretary maybe wasn't quite clear about that last week.
So, as I say, the Defence Secretary is talking about how we modernise and the investment. What I'm saying is we have already taken cuts in defence capability, but that's about making sure that we are able to focus our resources on the things that are going to matter most.
Let's then talk about the people who work for you, the people who proudly wear the uniform, and unfortunately, sometimes things go wrong for them. A lot of viewers will have seen the story this week of the 19-year-old gunner, Jaisley Beck. She took her own life in 2021 after being sexually assaulted by a senior sergeant. The criminal case is concluded, but Jaisley's mum, Leanne McCready, has said that young women shouldn't join the army. I know you've got daughters in your family. That's a terrible condemnation of what army life is like for young women, isn't it?
You can understand why Jaisley Beck's mother has said that. What happened to Jaisley was entirely unacceptable. It was criminal, and she was let down, and that's why the army has apologised. But since that horrible case, we've made a whole number of changes. We've introduced an independent Defence Serious Crimes Unit, we introduced a Victim and Witness Care Unit. Victims are able to choose between military or civilian justice system. We're one of the only departments that I'm aware of that has done a sexual harassment survey. And we've changed our policies around unacceptable behaviours and have a KC reviewing them. So those things have changed, and that's why I'm confident that the Armed Forces is a safe place for women to serve.
But Leanne, Jaisley's mum, wants to know, as she and other campaigners have been calling for an independent watchdog to look at these kinds of campaigns, she wants to know, why is the army still allowed to investigate itself? Recommendations to change that have been made since 2019. And she wants us to ask, why is it taking the loss of my daughter to shine a spotlight on this? When will there be an independent body to look at these kinds of complaints?
So the Defence Serious Crimes Unit is independent of the three services.
But it's still part of the military.
It's part of the Ministry of Defence. But as I said, if victims want their cases to be considered through the civilian justice system, then they can elect to do that. And that gives victims choice. And the independence of the Defence Serious Crimes Unit, that's been in place for over a year now, and that is making a difference. Just lastly, you write in the Telegraph newspaper this morning that this is also a time for a national endeavour. What do you mean by that? Well, what we've seen in Ukraine is that when war starts, it doesn't just affect the armed forces, it affects society. And the Strategic Defence Review pointed out that we needed to refocus on resilience, to think about how we can efficiently and effectively transition to war, and that's why the Defence Reform Bill that the government intends to bring before Parliament will provide some of the measures to ensure that we can protect our critical national infrastructure and mobilise industry to deliver the kind of deterrent effect that we require, because the strength of the nation, the strength of our industry is part of the strength of the country and our ability to deter adversaries. And so, Richard, are you nervous about your first huge moment at the Cenotaph? I know you've been to the service on lots of occasions, but a bit different now. You're the top of the top brass. It is. I walk out just ahead of where I was previously, but no, it's a very special moment and one that I'm very proud to be part of, and proud that the nation looks to the armed forces on that day and says thank you for what we do. So, Richard, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Come back and see us another time. I will do, for sure. Thank you. Thank you. Well, let's speak to the Conservative Shadow Defence Secretary, James Cartlidge, and you were a Defence Minister in the previous government, so you are very familiar with this area. Let's start then with what Sir Richard told us about UK military personnel and kit going to Belgium to help repel what are suspected to be Russian drones. I mean, that sounds like quite a serious step.
I think it's really important and I welcome it. There is a heightened threat environment. Whatever, the exact detail of any of the threats we face, we know that it's perhaps at the greatest extent since the Cold War. And one of the key parts of the way we deter those threats is by acting with other countries through NATO, with our allies. So I think it's really good. Just as we saw when we had Russian jets flying over Estonia, and we had, I think it was an Italian or a Dutch F-35 was flown up at that point. You've got the RAF going out to Belgium to support them with anti-drone kit. I think we've got the AUKUS system here in the UK, so I think that's very welcome and sends a strong signal. And people will understand why the head of the military didn't want to say explicitly, yes, these are Russian attacks, but is it your view that these attacks on Belgian airspace, drone buzzing, they have been carried out by Russia? Is that your view? Obviously, I can't say for certain either. I think what we can say, if you look at all the events we've seen, the drone incursions into Poland, NATO ally, that was, I think, Shaheeds, so clearly Russian drones. We ourselves, don't forget, had the Yantar, which was this Russian spy vessel in our waters. We've had Russian Bear planes coming near our airspace, and we've had other drone overflights. So I think when you add it all up together with what's happening in Ukraine, it's clear Russia remains a very serious threat, and I share the view of the Chief Defence Staff about the Russian threat. Do you think that the government then is doing enough in this difficult situation to protect the UK against Russian threats? Well, look, we obviously have a consensus on national security as far as we can, but the key question is always, unfortunately, about money and how serious the government takes it. Is this the top priority given the extent of the threat? The number one job of government is to defend the nation. My worry is we are hearing a lot of powerful words from the government. They did publish a strategic defence review, but the money is not coming for several years. It won't go to 2.5% until 2027, and they've banded around figures like 3.5%, even 5%, but there is not a single plan in the Treasury for any of that, whereas right now, as was highlighted in your piece, there are actually cuts taking place, 2.6 billion we understand this year, and that will have a significant impact on our war readiness. But when would you, as a party, if you get back into government, which you would like to do, when would you hit the NATO target with our allies of spending 3.5% of GDP of the whole economy on defence? Because that is a massive increase in how much taxpayers' cash right now goes towards these kinds of things. So what would your target be? So the policy we've stated, Kemi Badenoch earlier this year, she said she thought the government should go to 3% this Parliament. So how would you pay for it? Well, so when I first appeared on your programme, it was around the time when Keir Starmer was going out to see Donald Trump, and there's a lot of discussion about defence spending, and I said we had to make difficult choices about aid, but I also said about spending on benefits, and there's no getting away from this. My biggest worry on defence spending is the fact that Labour, unfortunately, when they brought forward measures to reform welfare, to be blunt, they bottled it in the face of their backbenchers. You know, the way benefit spending has increased, I think disability benefits are forecast to get to 100 billion this Parliament. That's enormous.
But you as a party, despite some years of pressure from people in the military sphere saying, come on, actually, you have to get your act together, you have to increase defence spending more quickly. The Ukraine conflict started on when you were in power. So by when would you want to hit that new NATO target of 3.5%?
So the policy we have is 3% in this Parliament.
But when would you want to hit the 3.5%? That is the target that the NATO alliance, which you speak of with great meaning and great belief in it, that's the target that NATO countries have agreed. So if you were back in power, by when would you actually hit that target?
This, you know, when we've been in government, we have always spent the NATO target, and that will not change.
But
I
it's
can't.
different now.
I'm not sitting in front of you writing the manifesto for the next Parliament. What
so
I'm
you
saying
don't
is
have a decision yet.
The position is, the threat we feel the threat is right now. We need to see far greater urgency from the government. You know, as you know, something I've discussed with you before. A big worry I have, having been the Defence Procurement Minister, is because of frankly, the penny pinching we're seeing in the department right now in the Ministry of Defence. Procurement has effectively been on hold since the election. If you speak to any defence company, they'll tell you they're waiting for the orders. We need to fire up our defence industrial base, so it's about what is spent now, because the threat is right now.
But if you speak to a lot of people in defence, they would also say it was hollowed out on your watch.
So that phrase is from Ben Wallace, who's a brilliant Secretary of State for Defence. He said defence spending was hollowed out under successive governments. He was referring to the fact...
You were in charge for 14 years, and there were quite a lot of different Conservative governments during that time, everybody
and he was referring to the fact that defence spending since the end of the Cold War has fallen year on year. And it has, there's no doubt in that. It started to rise again under Prime Minister Boris Johnson when Rishi Sunak was Chancellor, a very significant increase. And I think there is a consensus that defence spending needs to rise. But it won't rise unless the government grips spending, and that means the issue of welfare reform.
Just very briefly, you'll have seen our interview with Megan Garcia and perhaps heard our conversation about chatbots. Do the Conservatives believe that there ought to be more regulation in this area?
Well, as you know, we brought in the Online Safety Act. And if I may just say personally, you know, I actually agree with Lisa on this, Lisa Nandy. I have 4 children. I think looking after devices, the issue of mobile phones and so on is one of the toughest things for parents today. And, you know, my heart goes out to the parents in that case. It's absolutely shocking. I think that in many ways you hit the nail on the head earlier. It's about how on earth regulators keep up with technology. It's moving so fast, as your panel said as well. And I think that there is huge economic gain to be had from AI, how it can and also how it can transform healthcare and so on. But regulators have got to keep up. And I'll just give you one specific example, if I may. So when I was Justice Minister, we had the issue of deep fakes. The law had never heard of something called a deep fake. So yes, you have to adapt the law as technology changes.
James Cartlidge, thank you very much indeed. It's a truly modern dilemma for governments right around the world. Thanks very much indeed for coming in. Well, of course, the Remembrance Service is following us on BBC One, and Sophie Rayworth is there.
Good morning from the Cenotaph here in Whitehall, where people have been gathering since first thing this morning, determined to take their places here ahead of the wreath laying and the great march past of veterans that follows. Well, I'm joined here by 2 people who know exactly how important all of this is to the veterans and to their families as well. Lieutenant Colonel Dwayne Fletcher, who served in the military for 39 years in nursing, and Mark Atkinson, Director General of the Royal British Legion. Thank you both so much for joining us this morning. Dwayne Fletcher, how important is it this day for both those who have served and for their families?
I think it's extremely important. I think as a nation, it's the time that we come together and we can be really supportive of the sacrifices that they've made, and not just individual sacrifices of people, but also of the families when the people are away on operations. It's testament to the British that we're so stoic in this event and that people are here supporting us as well. It means a lot to people that have served.
And you have been here 4 or 5 times, haven't you, taken part in the march past? I mean, for you, it must be particularly raw because you looked after so many people, you saved many lives, but also you know people who were lost.
Yeah, it's very emotional and there'll be a little bit of a tear in my eye probably, yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. It's conflict. Conflict is raw. and there's still people struggling now, and we just need to help those people that are struggling now as well.
And Mark Atkinson, that is what you do, isn't it? You do help the people the veterans, the people who are struggling. The Royal British Legion has been organising March Past here since, 1927?
Yeah, it's a very proud day for the Royal British Legion. As you say, for almost 100 years we've been organising the March Past the Cenotaph, which follows the formal wreath laying. And today we've got more than 10,000 veterans, including Fletch, who will be marching with us. People ranging from 8 years old to children of those that have served, right through to 101. I think people coming as far away as Australia to be here today. So really proud to be organising the March Past for the 98th time.
World War II veterans as well.
We've got a number of World War II veterans with us today, as we did last night at the Festival of Remembrance at the Royal Albert Hall. So fantastic to have those people with us. They're marching with their regiments. They'll be at the front of their regiments, and we're delighted that they're with us today.
And Dwayne Fletcher, who do you actually think of as you march past the Cenotaph?
There's lots of people, there's lots of faces you've seen, lots of people I don't know that I've looked after. I mean, this year we lost one of our own nurses, very tragically, and we'll be thinking a lot of her as well at the same time. So there's lots of faces that don't haunt you. I think that you're paying your respects to them when you're doing this. So yeah, there'll be lots of thoughts, and as I said earlier, probably a tear in the eye as I walk past.
Dwayne Fletcher, Mark Atkinson, thank you both very much for talking to us this morning.
Thank you.
Well, the legacy of those wartime generations is so profound. Almost every family has a memory, an experience, a history, wherever they're from and whatever they do. Even Hollywood stars' lives were shaped that way sometimes. Bryan Cranston, the actor who smashed TV records in the series Breaking Bad, is in the UK right now, leading in an Arthur Miller classic play on stage in London soon. But when we met, he too was remembering the days of those who'd gone before.
We have a similar holiday. We call it Veterans Day in the States. Remembrance Day and Veterans Day, honoring those who served. It's the most important thing that any country can do for their service personnel. My parents were both in the service. And what is fascinating to me is that during wartime, there is still commerce going on. Mm-hmm. You know, and there people buying and selling and supplying, people adjusting their normal products to fit, and that's what this story is about with All My Sons. A machine shop owner adjusts what he normally makes, pressure cookers and things like that, to make cylinder heads for the Army Air Force, and it doesn't go so well.
And the play taps into the dark side of that and the dark side of the American dream. And of course, it's Joe's line, sure, he was my son, when he's talking about some of those servicemen. But I think to him, they were all my sons. What does he mean?
It's not just your blood relative. It's your brothers and sisters or sons and daughters who served. It's honoring all of them. And that's the point of that line at the end of the play, is that my character realizes I was so hyper-focused on my work for my son and this, but all these men and women who serve really should be considered all of our children and have that feeling, that deep sense of responsibility to heal them and help them. And that's why coming back from any deployment, I mean, every country should do everything possible to help them re-enter society and job training and things like that.
But the decisions that your character, Joe Keller, has made let down those people that he feels connection to, that responsibility that he, and as you say, all of us have to them. Tell us about his dark side and how he represents the, maybe not the American dream, maybe the American nightmare.
He forgets who he's responsible for, that parts that he's making is bigger than him. It's larger than him. There's something more important than just your particular personal family. It's the family of your community, of your city, of your country, of the world. And I think that's the lesson in this.
And what does that make you think of right now?
This play, All My Sons, really starts to examine the fracturing of the family due to differences in ideology and opinion. And I think that's what we can learn from it, is that whether you're in this country or my own, to have a different opinion is not a bad thing.
And when this play was written, though, people were so scared of Arthur Miller's opinions and the message he was trying to say. It was one of the reasons why he was hauled to Capitol Hill.
Oh.
He was tried to be shut down. We spoke to Kamala Harris, and she expressed real concern about the closing down of freedom of speech in America. She said that the current president couldn't take a joke. She was referring, of course, to Jimmy Kimmel being dragged off the air. Do you fear that in America freedom of speech is under attack?
Well, it definitely has been assaulted. The problem comes in, to me, when people of differing opinion use this hyperbolic refrain about, well, Laura, your opinion is ruining the country. You are going to ruin the country. And it's like, let's settle down. It's a different opinion. You and I may go through a bunch of different subjects and we may not agree on everything, but I don't necessarily feel you're out to ruin the country. I hope you don't feel that way. And so let's talk about it. I think when the finger pointing starts is when the listening stops.
Do you think the current president is guilty of that?
Our president is not someone who I voted for or wanted to be president. And yet he is our president. And I hope he's successful. I really do, for the sake of the country. And I hope, that's what I'm hoping for.
You have made some great TV, and our audience wouldn't forgive me if I didn't also ask you about some of that. So did playing Walter White in Breaking Bad, that series that so many people in this country were obsessed with, I just wondered, did it change you as a person?
I think it illuminated the difficulties that our country has. My character was a teacher in high school, and yet he couldn't make ends meet. He had to have a second job. And the role of the teacher in any country is unbelievably vital, and they should be paid handsomely.
But Walter White didn't just have a second job. I mean, he became a drug kingpin, and
Well, if you're pointing blame, I mean.
What are you doing?
These are my good clothes. You can't go home smelling like a meth lab.
I must ask you also about Malcolm in the Middle. There'll be lots of people watching right now who grew up watching Malcolm in the Middle, who maybe now with their kids are excited about seeing something of a revival coming soon. Who's learned what by the time they're going to be on screen again?
My gosh. We have 4 episodes coming early next year. And this is something I've been pushing for a decade.
Oh, really?
Yeah. What's interesting is that all the boys who were my sons on the show, all my sons, that's the tie-in, they are of the age now that I was when I first started. They have children of their own. And it's wonderful to see them now as they matured as grown men and good men, really good, hardworking, soulful guys. And I'm just so proud of them.
So not like when in All My Sons, the heartbreak is all the planning and the dreams for the children, that line, you ended up no better than we were.
Yes. No better than we were, and certainly it's not Malcolm in the Middle unless something goes terribly wrong. So that's true too.
I just wonder, you're taking on this very serious, classic play with a very strong message about the connection between men and boys and father and sons. You've talked publicly before about your relationship with your own dad, which wasn't straightforward. I just wonder, has going through the process of getting ready for this show, has it made you reflect, or has it made you think more about your own dad?
Yeah, I have an interesting relationship with him. He's passed. He had a sense of self-importance that he needed to, he was an actor himself for a long while, and that he needed to be a star. And I thought, that's an end result. That's something that happens that's not of your making. And I realized early on, I need to go the opposite way. I need to just focus on my work, do the work. And if someone taps me on the shoulder and says, we want you to star in this, it's like, oh, wow, that's fantastic. And that's the way I've guided my life. And hopefully my daughter, who's an actor too now, and she is doing exceptionally well. And that's what she's picked up, is that it's a gift to be able to make a living as an actor and never, ever forget how lucky we are.
Bryan Cranston, we've been very lucky to have you with us today.
Thank you, Laura.
In the
It's
studio.
nice to see you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, he might not have meant to be a star, but he certainly ended up that way. You've been busy getting in touch this morning. Let's have a look at some of your emails. Leslie's got in touch about technology, saying AI could provide advantages, but it has to be balanced against the incredible harm it's causing. Todd also mentions AI. Why are we allowing this to happen to our families? The government is meant to act to keep us safe. Act now. But Brian Kirk responds to Lisa Nandy's comments about the BBC. He says the BBC needs to get its act together, but having a politician involved in editorial matters is very dangerous. Well, let's check in with our panel as we head to 10:15. Gina, we've talked a lot about AI's challenges and advantages, but we're also thinking today of all days about defence and protecting the country, and technology is one of the threats that the military will tell us about now.
AI opens up a new front in war, and it's making the resilience of society even more important. British adversaries are already using AI for increased cyber attacks. They've more than doubled over the last year. China, Iran, North Korea, Russia, they are all attacking in a cold cyber war at the moment. But it should remind us, we have a deep, as Bryan Cranston just said, we have a deep sense of responsibility to one another, and that's what will help us have that resilience.
In terms of that kind of psychological resilience, you know, the chief of the military, Chris, was talking about national endeavour. Like, are we absorbing the sort of threats that face us now?
Well, we've been thinking very much about the military, about defence, and talking about war, and showing respect for all of those that have given their lives for remembrance. But what my duty is to do at this point is say we're at war with the planet. And whilst tragically we're killing hundreds of thousands and millions of ourselves at the moment, we could be killing billions unless we address that issue. And that's why I would absolutely implore any MP or peer that's watching this programme, we know that they watch, to please come to our national emergency briefing on the 27th of November. It's very important that our decision makers take on board the significant gravity that we find ourselves in, not as nations, but as a species.
But could technology be part of the answer there?
Of course. We have to regulate that technology in time. And I think that what we've established this morning is that AI is speeding ahead and regulation is simply not keeping up. But ultimately, it's AI. If we can't breathe and there isn't any food and everything's flooding and we've got drought all over the world, then these will become secondary issues. And that is very much on our real horizon at the moment. Please come to the briefing. Listen to real science. Exclude the misinformation.
You've issued your invitation on several occasions, Chris. I think, and Suzanne, I just want to bring you in. You know, technology, we talk about it in all its risks and also its downsides this morning, but it can be life-changing.
Of course. And just want to end on a really good news story.
Well, let's have one of them.
Which is the presenter Davina McCall is across the papers today because she spotted a lump in her breast, and she obviously then went to get it checked. But the reason that she said she did that was that she saw an old school, old-fashioned poster campaign as part of my colleague Lorraine Kelly's programme on the back of a dressing room door. When you change, check. She checked for a lump. She found one. She had a lumpectomy, obviously technology involved there. But that in itself, that message will save lives.
OK, Susanna, Chris and Gina, it's been a real pleasure to have the three of you with us this morning. It's a special day when we cover Remembrance Sunday. Thank you to all of our guests this morning and to you, of course, from watching at home. Remembrance Sunday special coverage begins in its full form on BBC One in just a couple of moments. That's the scene as the cenotaph now, as events start to build up to that moment when many of us will fall silent at 11 o'clock. I'll be on newscast on BBC Sounds a bit later today with Adam Fleming, and it's not that long till the budget. So we'd love to know what's on your mind ahead of that important day. So remember, you can always get in touch. And I'll look forward to seeing you next Sunday, same time, same place.